All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the SDR Hotline. It's the theme of Sales Blacker, and today I have a very special guest, Morgan J Ingram. So, Morgan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I'm excited. We're ready to go. We're ready to go.
Here we go. So, what's got you so pumped today?
I think so. For the past, I think it's probably like 2.5, 3 weeks, I've just felt exhausted.
Yes.
And I'm not one to admit that. I'll normally just push through and just be like super positive. Yeah, I've just been exhausted. So I'm pumped because I was talking to John yesterday, and I have this book right here. It's like my notebook. It's got like all my stuff in here. And I wrote down all the things that I'm doing. And I realized this is a lot of stuff. Like, what is going on? So basically what I did is to figure out like, okay, do I need to do this anymore? Do I need to figure out how to do this differently? Or can I delegate? Yeah. And then also within that, how much energy is it taking away from me? So I did that exercise yesterday, talked to some people, and I feel great now. It was in a very therapeutic exercise. So now I'm good.
Okay, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to write this down. I've been going through an exercise of just looking at my calendar and saying, all right, I need to get rid of all these things. Like, do not serve my energy. Also, I noticed that we have some people who are coming in. Hello, I know Vicky, Mason, David, Tequila. What's going on, y'all? If there's any questions that you have for Morgan, feel free to submit those, and we'll make sure that those get answered as well. But again, Morgan, I'm super excited you're here. A little bit of a backstory. I'm going to talk a little bit, and then I'll stop. But well, we met up like a month or two ago, like for the first time ever one-on-one. And I was like, yo, Morgan, I need to know about SDR Chronicles. How did you start there? Like, tell me about yourself. Because when I was an SDR back in 2015, you were the only person who was sharing content on sales development and what it takes to be like a really good sales development rep. So you've been someone I've been following for the past few years. So it's amazing to also see like the trajectory and the journey that you've been on as well. So I'm like, all right, I just want to learn more about how you got here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it has definitely been a journey and also as well. So Vicky said coming in hot. So you already know, like, I got a soundboard over here already. So like, yeah, so I am coming in hot. But yeah, no, I'm excited for this conversation and to just share, what I've learned in the journey, and for other SDRs that are popping in this conversation, how you all can learn as well.
Yes, definitely. No, Vicky, you're right. I do need one for SDRs. I was actually talking to Morgan about it before we went live. I think I missed my opportunity. I missed my shot. That's a me thing. I'll get one eventually though. But maybe Morgan, like I doubt that people don't know who you are, but maybe a quick like introduction of yourself, what you've been up to, what you're working on.
Yeah, so I started off as a BDR SDR. I started off doing inbound, outbound. And as most people, I never wanted to get in sales at all. Like, that was not what I wanted to do whatsoever. However, I realized that there was an opportunity at the company that was looking for SDRs. I cold called their VP of sales, and that's how I got involved and how I got in the conversation, which was pretty cool. And from there, that's how I got involved with being an SDR and started prospecting, the cold calling, and LinkedIn, which was about 5 to 6 years ago. And just as GB said, like, I started a YouTube channel called the SDR Chronicles to document my journey as an SDR and share with people, like, this is how you can be successful. These are things that you can do to stand out. And then what that ended up leading into is getting promoted to an SDR manager, where I had about 13 reps that I managed at the time. And then I got approached by John Barrows. So most people have probably seen his content before or been in a training of his. He approached me to join his team. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I specialized in the SDR prospecting realm for training, but it's evolved to now where I talk about SDR to AE transition, which isn't talked about enough. And also what I do as well as content. I have a podcast and posting. There's a lot going on. So that's what I do as of today. And again, it's about being consistent and seeing where you can grow. I mean, I just talked about being exhausted, right? But knowing like, hey, I really need to take advantage of this, or maybe I need to do something different over here. I think all those things are important. But yeah, that's like the background on me and like my journey so far.
Okay, awesome. I could take this conversation so many places. The first thing that I want to maybe focus on, because there's one piece, just the act of sharing I think is something that maybe some folks aren't taking an advantage of quite as much, or they're, whether that's like, all right, hey, I don't feel like I have something to share, or like I don't know what to share, or like who am I to share, those kind of things. But I love the fact that you're just willing to like put yourself out there and ask for feedback. What has really helped you to be open and sharing what you're learning and sharing what works for you, or even sharing about things that like don't work for you?
Yeah, so actually be curious for everyone that's listening in here, and appreciate you listening in on a Friday and also the last day
Of the month.
right? So a lot of people are probably trying to get after it. So thanks for tuning in. Put a 1 in the chat for me, like if you as of right now want to share more, but you're like you don't really know why you don't want to share more, or you feel like there's a barrier. I just would like to see like where everyone's at. Just put a 1 in the chat for me, and as you put the 1s in there, so for me, like what I've realized is there's 3 things. Number 1 is that at the end of the day, you have to find a way to find out that people just don't really, you are so concerned about what other people think about you. At the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, because people aren't really thinking about that as deep a detail as you think that they are. So one thing I had to take a step back on is be like, you know what, like not all these people really care at the end of the day. But and also the people that I'm trying to impress, like it doesn't even matter, right? And also what's happening is because you're worried about the people that could judge you, they aren't gonna impact your career, right? They're not gonna help you get to the next step. So why am I worried about these people? And what I found out is when I stopped worrying about that as much, and I just started focusing on what type of content or feedback I can get that to improve myself, that's when I started getting people to engage with me more. And the people that I really wanted to talk to, it was really beneficial. Like it was crazy, because I was in Clubhouse, just to give you all an example, and I was just hanging out in the room. Like I really was not trying to get on stage at all. I was just hanging out. And someone was like, yo, Morgan's in the room. I didn't know this person at all. They're like, yo, Morgan's in the room. I was like, okay, like what's going on? Like, yo, bring me up to the stage. And I'm really like walking outside. I'm like, I am not equipped to have a intellectual conversation right now. But sure, let me hop in. Like, yeah, Morgan, like tell us about da-da-da. And I'm going, right? And so I was up there for like an hour, and I left, and I hit the guy up and was like, yo, like we've never connected before. Like, what are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, so the reason I brought you up, and for context, we were talking about LinkedIn tips. He's like, the reason I brought you up is because I've watched your journey for the past 5 years, and I've appreciated that in the beginning, which was crazy, right? He said, I saw people making fun of you for creating content, which I did. I had a lot of haters in the beginning. A lot of people that
I missed that. Okay.
Ironically enough, a lot of people who hate on me are posting content now, but that's a different story. But that's a different story, right? But the whole thing, though, right, is that through that beginning, it was tough because I didn't really have a lot of people to associate with, because not a lot of people were creating the content, right? But he said, I appreciated how transparent and open you were for the past 5 years. We've never had a conversation, but that's why I brought you up. And now he's cool. Like, and we chop it up like back and forth like every other day. So like, I'm not really worried about other people. I'm focusing on like each post, does it have impact? Shout out some people in here. We got shout out to Chris. I see you, man. Shout out to you. But the thing is that like, that's number 1. Now, once you get to that, number 2 is I got this from a course. It's called Impact University. So I don't know how many of you all know about Tom Bilyeu. And if you do, like, you can chime in the comments and be like, oh yeah, I know who Tom Bilyeu is. For context, who he is he basically created this company, Quest Bars. You probably may have eaten them before. And he also has a podcast called Impact Theory. And I'm taking his course, and what he talks about is we have to figure out where our ego is at. Now, this is a deep one. This one really hit me.
You're gonna have to break this out. Like, give us the statement. You're also gonna have to break this open.
Like this was so deep. So he said, for such a long time, it's really resonated with me. He's like, for such a long time, my ego has been wrapped around my career. This is Tom saying it. And he's like, I've always wanted to make $1 million. I've always wanted to make $1 billion. And like, that was what was driving me. But what happens is that because you want that accolade, sometimes you don't ask for help. You're just like, I'm going to figure out myself because I'm going to be the guy. Or I'm going to be the one, like, it's all me. Like, I figured this out, which in the past, I've actually had that problem. It's like, oh, I'll figure it out because it's all me. like
Yes.
Morgan. But he said something that I was like, oh, okay, that's what I need to change to. And this is how you can practically ask for feedback. And I ask for feedback all the time. Chris can ask you, like, I ask for feedback all the time. I really don't even care at this point because it doesn't matter. And he said, you need your ego to be wrapped around being a scholar. Now, I want everyone to really think about that. Having your ego wrapped around being the best scholar you can be, not the best sales rep, not the best, right? Not the best CEO, which you can strive for those things. But what if you just focus on being the best scholar? One who takes information and executes on it. So then I was like, all right, like, let me just be a scholar. Like, if I strive to be best scholar, I will unashamedly ask for feedback and I will execute on it. And I don't really care where I got it from. I got the information and I executed, because the execution is me, right? No one can force me to execute. But if I just think about just being a scholar, that's the only thing I care about. I've asked feedback from other SDRs. I've asked feedback from other AEs. But I train SDRs and AEs. That doesn't make sense. Yeah. But I don't care. Like, I talked to a rep it was like 3 weeks ago, and he was out of Germany, and I was like, "Yo, how do I prospect in Germany? Yeah, I don't know how to do this, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, let's chop it up." I was talking to someone the other day. Shout out to my guy Dakota. He might be watching, but shout out to Dakota. I'm on Twitch now, and I didn't know how to set up OBS. I didn't know how to do a Twitch stream. I was like, dude,
I don't know what OBS is.
Right? It's like, what is this? Like, I don't know how to do it. And he was like, yeah, dude, I'll show you. Like, I'm at this point, like, I don't really care where I get the advice from. As long as you got the advice, I'm gonna execute on it. I'll show you love like I'm doing now, and we'll move on. Right. Yeah. So I should shout out to Roderick.
Yes.
Shout out to Roderick. I'm gonna show him some love. Actually, I had a shirt on earlier. Hope is not a strategy, but he said something that was so impactful to me, and it changed the way that I did podcasts and training and everything. He said, and he might have said this, right? Start having conversations, not presentations.
Ooh.
Like, I really want y'all to write that down and like think about that. As a sales rep, start having conversations, not presentations.
Walk me through what this means. Like, what? Like, what's?
I'm gonna dive into it.
Okay, here we go. Yes.
Because think about it, right? You probably on a good amount of demos. You probably get prospected a good bit, and let's say you're interested in the product. Typical demo goes, "Hey, Gabrielle, glad you hopped on the call today. How's the weather in blah blah blah, Chicago? Oh yeah, it's cold. So let's move on, right?" Right? Then it's like, okay, cool. Well, here's my demo that I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna go through all these different things that I'm gonna cover, and I'm gonna ask you what the timeline is, and then I'm not gonna define next step. Like, it's the same thing.
Yep.
You go in route mode, right? So at the end of the day, what does that mean? Don't do that. All right. Like, straight up, like, don't do that. So conversations is being intentional in the moment, right? I'm here with you and I'm actively listening. I'm asking questions and I include you in the conversation versus presenting to you. So what I used to do in sales training is I was like, okay, cool. I have the information. I'm just going to present to you. But what happened is I created distance, and I called it created separation between me and the audience. Right? It's, hey, I have the information. Listen to me. If you don't like it, whatever. Versus, I have the information. I'm your guide on this journey, yet you're part of this conversation. Yeah. If you have questions, feel free to ask. If you want to challenge something, feel free to challenge me. If you have an insight, feel free to give an insight on what I'm saying. And I realized when I got that advice, everything changed for me, because yes, I'm the guide in the conversation, but that doesn't mean that someone else can't come in and provide their insight.
Yeah.
Right. And then people feel like they're more included and they're willing to talk. That's why demos go bad, because it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do my same demo every time, versus asking the client the question, hey, how does this compare to what you're doing today? Like, where do you see this being applicable? We have to start having more of these conversations than the presentations. And I know that's not to what the original question was, right? But that's what Roderick told me, and like, it hit home with me so hard, and it changed the way that I went into my conversations. Yeah. Right. I wasn't just like, okay, like, here we go. It's like, no, like, what's happening? Let me get the context. Let me interact. It's really important.
You know, And that's an incredibly important point. And one of the things that I'm recognizing is that folks who have been in sales for a while, so let's say like 5 years, like you have enough experience to like trust yourself. You've also like gone through like the training or follow the processes that management and leadership wants you to do, and it doesn't work as well. So like I've definitely been in organizations where it's like, hey, we're trying to create some kind of predictable pipeline or a sales process, and so like now we need to standardize it. Everybody needs to do the exact same thing. I'm like thinking about I'm even thinking about in Sandler's book, Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. There's this whole conversation around like the dummy curve. Like we come in not knowing a lot, we ask a lot of questions, we learn more, we stop asking questions, and then we learn over time. Like actually, we're smart enough to know that we don't need to let everyone know how smart that we are. So I think it's just an incredible like point to make, especially for folks who might be early on in their career. It's like, how can I, and this is the question I have for you. It's almost like, what is any advice or perspective you can give to someone who's earlier on in their career in sales, like might be in an environment where they're being told to have one size fits all approach, like how to actually have confidence in breaking away from that?
Yeah. So slight step back and then I'll answer the question. So for everyone, again, those things that I mentioned in terms of like getting more comfortable, like definitely take action on it. Be more of a student, a scholar here, like have your ego wrapped around that. Don't worry about everyone else. And the last thing I want to add, and then I'll get to the question, is make sure that you're documenting everything that you're doing and sharing that, right? Because like this is context. This is really important because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to post. All right, well, just use this context and like use my story as confidence. I was an SDR 5 years ago, 4 months into my SDR role, right? And I was 8 to 9 months out of college. And I decided to make a YouTube channel and put it on LinkedIn where there's other sales executives being like, who the heck is this kid? So I just want to give you all that context, like how like early I was doing it. And it still led to results. So I promise you'll have a story to tell. So getting to this point, what you have to start doing more of, and this is actually what I've started to do to catch myself, is when you already know what's happening, you tend to cut people off, right? Or you just already have it in your head of what you're going to do. So one thing that you can do to start not going the motions and to like be intentional in everything you do is to pause. Now, a lot of you guys like, oh, pausing, like that sounds like basic advice. It's not though. When you pause, it gives you time to reflect on what you're going to say. But what also happens that's pretty interesting if you've done this before is it opens up the conversation for them to say more. So typically, you know where the conversation is going to go, right? But if you pause, sometimes they might have something else to add that you weren't expecting.
Yes.
Right. Which creates a whole nother avenue. So what I've done is do a lot more pausing. So for those of you who may have followed me for years now, you could watch my first videos and I'm like, like I'm crazy. I'm like, yo, this guy's like on something, right? But now have more control over my energy and I also have more control of the conversations I'm in. That's why I have to pause way more than I'm used to. But ultimately what that's doing though is it's allowing me to get composure to be like, okay, like, whoa, okay, like where do I need to go? Because it slows me down to make sure, which is the follow-up to my thing, is asking more questions and really just comes down to being more genuinely curious. Like I would write that down if like you're struggling with that right now and like you're going through the motions, and it happens to SDRs a lot. Like probably month 7 is when you start realizing, you know, all the objections, all the stuff, and you just go through the motions. Start pausing more, right? And that will allow you to be way more concise. And you probably have noticed in this conversation, I pause quite a bit in my talk because I'm slowing myself down. Because if I don't pause, I'm like, and you're like, Morgan, I can't hear you. Right? Like, I don't know what you're saying. You need to slow down. Can you get that down so I can put the notes right? So that happened. And like, I realized that and I had to learn. And that's why pausing allows you to not go through the motions because you have to be in the moment. And then you can ask questions on what they're saying And I'll say this last bit, and this was like really insightful. So I got this from Chris Doe, and he has a YouTube channel called The Future. And for context on him is he is a designer, creative. So he does a lot of like creative work, like brand illustration, design work, right? But he's got really good insights. And he said something in his YouTube video about selling and about just being more intentional. And he's like, when you're in conversations, try to find the words that are different or unique. And what I mean by that is some people might say, hey, you know what, we have an enormous number this year, or yeah, my team just is slugging along. So what I mean, so when I hear slugging or enormous, it's like, okay, that's an abnormal word, an adjective that you're using. So when you pause, it's like, you could use a Chris Voss, but it's just like, whoa, like abnormal number, like what's going on there? Or like your team's being sluggish, like why are you using the word sluggish, right? So you want to drill more into these, what they're basically called like abnormal words. And everybody in this conversation, they bring up an abnormal word to describe a situation, but they don't have that, I wouldn't say it's trust, but they're just not open with you yet. Because maybe it's just an initial conversation, or you know, maybe you met them 2 or 3 times. But if you can drill into those adjectives or abnormal words, you can get more out of the conversation than you might have realized. And even in a conversation earlier today, someone had briefly mentioned esports, and I was like, that's abnormal. Esports, like I know about esports, and then we just literally chopped it up for esports about 20 minutes, but that was nowhere in his profile. But we just got there because I was intently listening and pausing. So that's a really big piece there.
Oh, so good. So good. I know I had pulled up Liam's, it hurts me to pause. And I work with Liam, so hey Liam. But yeah, no, it hurts me to pause. If I were to think, was it 5 years ago when I first stepped into the AE role, I thought that I was supposed to fill the time like up with words. Like if there was silence, there was a problem. In one of our, it was one of our professional services folks. So he was attached to the most amount of money the company had ever sold. And he had a whole tip or a trick where he would double mute himself. And then he would count to 7 and back to 1 before he would say anything else. So I was like, I don't know if I can actually do that. But now 5 years later, I'm like, you'll be fine. Breathe.
It's all good.
Like a deep sigh. Yeah. I was like, set the room, right? Like set the tone. It's going to be all right. So I think that's amazing. One of the questions that I had for you, and also again, like if anyone has questions that they would like to ask Morgan, feel free to drop those in the chat. But one of the things I was really curious about for you is, because you had talked about like seeking feedback, like being a scholar. I know for myself, like one of the challenges that I have is like knowing even like what help I'm really asking for, whether that's because I don't actually know, like, right, I don't know exactly where I'm supposed to be helped. I don't know what the next step of progress is, but it seems, at least from what I've observed from kind of the outside looking in, that this is something that you're kind of acutely familiar with and very comfortable doing. Like, any advice that you would give on how to approach figuring out what you're actually supposed to be asking help for?
Yeah. So there's actually an add-on to this as well. I think Chris is probably still in here. So this is funny because we had this conversation 4 months ago. So I will seek feedback, but I'm not good at receiving constructive feedback or negative feedback. It gives me like a facial reaction. And John knows this, Katie knows this. Like if they give me something that's constructive, I will go do it. But like my body doesn't react to it well. It's kind of like, dude, what are you doing? Or why are you doing this? Right? I like anybody can attest to it. If they probably give me, they've probably seen it before. Like I look weird, right? But so what I had to do is, before I give the advice, is I had to start writing down when I got feedback, so I didn't have this visceral reaction that I normally have. No one obviously likes to have negative or constructive feedback happen. I like to get it in the end result so I can take execution on it. But in the moment, it sucks, right? Because it's like, oh man, I didn't do that right, or I could have done better there. So, like what I'll do to figure out what I'm gonna ask questions on before I get to like the next step of it is figuring out what the goal is first. right? So if you want to get promoted, let me just keep it simple, right? If you want to go to SDR to AE, right? Probably the one thing that you want to figure out is what are the skill sets that I need to do or learn to be an AE. So what you can do is write those down. So I have skill sets that I have written down to get feedback on. So like one of them, let's just use an example, is I'm looking to understand sponsorships more. So now I'm talking to people about sponsorships and how does that work, not only in our space, but in other spaces. And I'm willing to reach out to get that feedback. And so now I'm looking at that. Like another thing I'm looking to learn is I'm learning reels and TikToks because I'm just like, I'm intrigued. So like I'm reaching out to people, yo, how do you do this TikTok, right? And it's just a weird ask, but like I don't know how to do it. Like, yeah, I've been well on LinkedIn, but like I don't know how to do that stuff. So I've been asking for that feedback. So the thing is that like, yeah, you can't just randomly ask for feedback for people and take their time if you don't know what you want, which is one of my frustrations when people say, hey, do you have 30 minutes? But they don't know what they want to talk about in 30 minutes. Well, that means I probably won't take the meeting with you because like, what are we talking about? So make sure that you write down what your skills are. I'm not going to give you an exact number. I have like 12 written down that I know I need to learn to get to the next step that I want to get to. But that's how you figure out how to ask for feedback is write down the skills that you need to go learn to get whatever the next step is. SDR AE is probably the easiest example I can give right now. Go ask an AE, what skills should I learn right now? Go ask the top AE. This is simple. Go ask the top AE. What are the skills I need to learn? Intangible and intangible, right? Write them down and then figure out, okay, who can give me this information? Is it a friend? Is it a family member? Is it a mentor? Is it a colleague? That's what you got to figure out. And then proactively ask. But because you know what skill you're trying to improve, people are willing to give it to you. Hey, I'm trying to get better at discovery calls. This is one of the skills I need to learn. Can you help me? That person 99% of the time is going to say yes. Context is everything. But if you say, hey, I need help, it's like, oh, with what? Right? That could be like a day conversation.
So. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Is it okay to maybe I pull in some of these questions that folks are asking? All right, cool. So Jarrett, Morgan, what was your biggest loss in your sales career? How did you bounce back from it?
I'm assuming when we're saying loss, that's like, I guess, dollar signs, but it also could be like loss as in like mentally. So yes. I have two. So my biggest loss, honestly, was in the first 3 months. I didn't hit quota in the first 3 months. So that to me was a loss because I never faced just utter failure before, like on that degree where it's like month after month, you're just not getting it. For whatever reason, I just wasn't. And I thought being an SDR was going to be easy because they were just like, yo, you just got to schedule meetings. I'm like, all right, that's pretty chill. Like, I got it. No, not at all. Right. And so what happens, right, is that was my biggest loss because I didn't really know how to bounce back, to be honest, at first, Jared. I almost quit as an SDR. Like I shouldn't be here, to be honest. Like I almost was like, I'm done with this. And I was going to go into marketing or even go back into sports management and figure out something there. But how I bounced back was by being open about it. And what I mean by that is I went to my VP of sales. It's funny because we had a call like 5 months ago. And we were laughing about it, but I went to her and I was like, yo, like, I don't know if this is for me. Straight up, I don't know if this is for me. And she asked me just such an important question, which led to me moving forward. And now I ask myself this and realize that like pretty much every time I ask myself this question, I realize it's really me is, are you giving this role 100%? I wasn't at all. I was semi-coasting, and I think there's more things I could have been doing for sure. And I wasn't organized. I kind of was just showing up, hoping things would happen. Hope is not a strategy. I really was like, I'll get it. But I wasn't being proactive. I wasn't asking for advice. I wasn't doing the things I knew I should have been doing. And so I remember them telling me like, yeah, you got 1 month to figure this out. And so I remember at the time, there was really the main source was like Sales Hacker and resources like that, obviously here, right? Like that was like the main resource I had. I just went in the blogs and I just found all the info where people were just giving nuggets, and I just did it. I just did the advice, which a lot of people are hesitant. They're like, where's the data on X quad? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Like, just do it. All right. And then you could figure it out from there. So I took, shout out to Ralph Barcy, I took his calendar and made my own calendar. I took a lot of cold call formulas. I took a lot of email formulas. And then this reason I'm actually so proficient in Sales Nav is because shout out to my guy Gabe at Lucid Chart. I watched all of his videos on Sales Nav, and then I just added my own spin to it as well. So I just went deep. And I just went out and learned. And I was like, I'm just committing. I'm going to go all in, because this is the most important thing. Because when you go all in, you have no regrets. I went all in. So it was like, either this is for me or it's not. And when I went all in, I realized how much I enjoyed prospecting. I'm probably one of the rare people that like, I get a thrill out of prospecting. Like, I'm fired up about it. And that's where I found my joy. But that was the biggest loss to me, Jarrett, like across the board. It was like that first 3 months was a loss because I straight up wanted to quit. Like, I didn't want anything to do with being in sales or an SDR. And there's other losses, like, you know, big deals where I should have been multi-threaded, or big losses where, you know, I had a big deal and the board advisors came in and they recommend another trainer. Like, those things have happened. But I always look back at the first 3 months being the biggest loss, because that was the closest point that I've had to quitting.
Can I take a moment? Pause. And there's this is, again, reflecting on experiences that I've had that at the time felt like losses. And then, you know, a certain amount of time passes, right? We separate from those experiences, and then we start to recognize, like, wow, like, without actually having had that experience, would we be the people that we are? Would we have accomplished the things that we've accomplished? Would we have the perspective that we have? So, I mean, one of the things that you shared, right, is what I'm observing and what I'm hearing. It's like, hey, like, be a scholar, right? Like, of course, there's a language that you have there from the from Impact University, right? But it sounds like that was something you were doing that, like, you figured that out. Like, I'm just going to do these things. I'm going to research. I'm going to learn. I'm going to act on the advice. I'm going to document along the way. I'm going to keep on testing and refining, and just being like, just having this insatiable hunger to learn. So sometimes, like, we get backed into a corner, and that's really when we start to see, like, who the F we are. So I'm gonna hashtag that, like, who the F we are, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. We have another question here from Tequila. And I'm really excited because, like, so Tequila sent me a LinkedIn message the other day, and I was like, I love the way you write. So let's help the girl out, or the woman out, not girl, but, like, let's help her out. I would love to see her posting more. She has such a unique tone.
Okay, so tools. I'm assuming, like, this is, we gotta dive into this, right? Because when you're thinking about tools, is it like tools to post the content like a Hootsuite or something like that, or tools to actually come up with ideas? Like, that's another piece to it as well. That
exists?
There is. Yes, it does exist. There is a site. I'm actually trying to I had it the other day and I was like, oh, I don't need it right now, but I'm actually going to find it, because it's basically a site. I think it's called like Everyday Ideas or something like that. I actually going to find the source, and I could put it back in this after the live, because I was watching a video the other day and I wrote it down. I just didn't do anything with it. But there is a site basically that can help you create ideas for you based on your topic, and it will give you different insights. But I can go find that, right? But here's the thing. This is like actually the easiest way to create content is when you are creating content in the beginning, right? This changed the game for me. Everyone starts off at 0. And this is a side note, but I want everyone to do this. Like, if you want to create content, like, this will make you feel better. This is why I actually post a lot, because it just made me feel better. Go back to Gary V's first video. Go back to Rogan. Rogan's first podcast, which is actually awful, by the way. If you go watch Joe Rogan's first podcast interview, like go watch it. Go watch Eric Thomas's first video. Go watch Tony Robbins' first video. I want you to go, anybody you admire, go watch their first movie. Anything. I don't care. And you'll notice how awful they are. Like it's like I watched Gary Vee's first video. I was like, yo, this dude is not that good. Like his first video is just not good. Like, go watch my first video. It's not good. So that's the issue. That's the issue with society, is that we only look at the highlights, but we're not willing to get in like the dirt and the mud to figure out like where's the seed. Like where did this start? Oh, you weren't that good. Straight up, like you just weren't that good. Like I don't know if you've ever listened to Kobe's like interview. He was like, the first public game he ever played, he scored 0 points.
Yes.
Like go to the origins of these people, and you'll realize like they just are more consistent, and they were willing to fine tune, and they're willing to put themselves out there. That's really the big difference, to be honest. And there's obviously nuances in strategy, and we can go there, but go watch the first video or the first content piece from everybody, and just look at it and be like, well, all right, I can do this, which goes to the next step. So when you first start out and creating the content, so it already sounds like you have the content going based on what you're saying here. I want you to do this, and you'll notice how special this is. I don't care if you get 1, 2, or 3 likes. It actually doesn't matter, because this is what I did, is reach out to the person that liked the content and say, hey, Brooklyn, thanks so much for liking my content. What other type of content would be impactful for you for me to post? That's what I did in the beginning. And then people were like, you know what? I like to learn about objection handling. I like to learn about time management. So I never had to think about ideas. I just asked people like, hey, yo, like, thanks for liking the content. Like, what else would you like to see? Right? They spent the second to like it. They obviously like what I had to say or what I put. They probably want more, right? But I got to reach out and ask. Right. So if I ask them, they're like, oh, cool. Yeah. Can you do something on this? Can you do something on that? And stuff I didn't even think about. So in the beginning, I don't have it anymore because I don't really need it as much. But like I had a spreadsheet of all the topics, and I also had a spreadsheet of the person who gave me the content. So what would happen is when I posted the content, I would share it with them in Messenger. Like, hey, thanks so much for saying that the other day. Like I actually made a video on it. Like, check it out. And I can't tell you like how many people appreciated that, because people don't like reach out to their supporters in the beginning. They just like, oh, I should have 100 comments. Okay, what about the one person who's there? Like, stop worrying about trying to get to the thousands. And obviously I'm speaking this and I'm at that part, but like I'm still saying it like as a person who had 1 or 2 likes, I was just 1 or 2 likes. Let's focus on you. Like, what do you want? Right. And then that person will be like, wow, you took the time to not only reach out to me and thanks for liking this content, you also shared with me like the content you created based on what I asked for. Less than 0.001% of people do exactly what I just told you. But that's the difference between growing your account and actually growing real engagement and like making quality content for your audience. And this is the last point I'll make for you, Tequila, here is, as you do everything that I just said there, you also can look at other people in your space and how they're posting and really just take their concept and not copy, but emulate, which is different. And then the follow-up step is you have to make a decision, and everyone here, if you want to create content, on how do you want to do that content. So there's 3 different types of pieces of content. One is video, which I'm very proficient in, and that's what I love to do. 2 is written. I'm not a writer, so it's not really me. So I actually take my video content and make it written content. That's a waterfall effect. And then 3 is audio. So maybe you don't like video, you don't like writing, but maybe you're a podcast person, right? You're really good at interviewing, getting deep there. Those are things that you want to do. So Tequila, hopefully that helped answer that. But in terms of creating content, like that's what I would do. And that's what I did to see the consistency and the engagement, all the stuff that you're looking for.
I love that. Expect the piece around like engaging with the folks who are engaging with you, asking them those questions that you'd mentioned. I'm trying to think, like I've really only been posting for, hasn't even been a full year yet, but like a lot, like what could take the stress out of posting on a consistent basis is really just asking people like, what would you like to see? Or even what was it about the post that like spoke to you? What did you like? You can build meaningful like connections with them. They can introduce you to other people. They can reshare your kinds of posts. And with that, right, you can raise your visibility and even be potentially inspired to start publishing even more content or have more ideas around that. So I love that. Thank you. And then I have, and you were talking about your first interviews being really crappy. I did one of my first podcasts with Robert Creighton right here. And I cringed. I cringed the entire time while listening back to it, but love Robert. But here's a question here. When doing cold outreach, what does a response not interested really mean?
So side note, keep that in mind in terms of like podcasts that made you cringe. Because one of the things that's happening now is I'm actually going back to them and listening to them, and even had people reach out to me to be like, hey, like, let's bring you on again and talk about how you've improved or talk about like something different from that viewpoint. So having cringy podcasts, like obviously the moment they suck, but it's also like a learning moment for the audience for you to come back and they're like, whoa, like this person really grew, right? I think that's really important to see. So just as a side note, but when doing outreach, what does the response not interested really mean? Well, Robert, there's tons of context here, right? Like, when are they saying not interested? And this is what I mean by that. If it's at the beginning of the cold call, well, that doesn't make any sense. They can't be not interested in nothing, right? You haven't given them anything, so they can't be not interested. Versus if they're not interested towards the end of the call, those are two different scenarios. So let's go through them. So this is the go-to. Like, I got this a lot, and it obviously is really annoying because you want to follow up and say like, yeah, like not interested in what? Like, we haven't even gotten to the meat of this. So Robert, this is something you can do, and this is what I train clients on. This is what I do myself if I get this. Is very simple. It's called 30 seconds for 30 minutes. And so let's say, Robert, the person's like not interested at the beginning of the call. I say, hey, completely understand that. I know a lot of people are busy. All I'm asking for is 30 seconds of your time. And in that 30 seconds, I'll explain to you what we do over here at JB Sales. And if that's applicable, we could put time on the calendar to talk. If not, you can hang up on me. Does that sound fair? Now, let's talk about it, right? Because people are like, oh, Morgan, like, why does that work? So we're going to discuss it. So there's psychology behind it. First and foremost, does that sound fair? If you're facing any objection, you can always end it with, does that sound fair? Because most people don't want to be unfair. So like, oh yeah, that's fair. So that's a tip for everyone. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm struggling, like, does that sound fair? Like, that's the go-to question because no one wants to be unfair. The last part is, I said 30 seconds because typically if someone answers the phone, they have at least 90 seconds. I've never answered the phone call. I'm like, yeah, I got 5 seconds. If I don't answer the phone, that means I'm busy.
Yeah.
Right? No one ever answers. Oh yeah, like I'm writing into, like, why? Like, unless like you, for a certain reason, like you're waiting for a certain scenario, but for the majority of the time, no one's answering the phone is like, yeah, I got 2 seconds here. That makes no sense whatsoever. So you have at least 30 seconds to get it off. So that's why I'm saying, if not, you can hang up on me. Because the whole premise there is that they have an out now. 30 seconds is all I need to do is sit here, listen to whatever you have to say, and I can hang up. Cool. Right? So that changes the situation. Now, this is an interesting part here, Robert, as well, is when someone says not interested, there's a lot of context here on like where they say it. If it's beyond the point that I just mentioned, that we would have to drill further into, because there's so many different scenarios on where they could say not interested, and my answer would change. But to give you a formula that you could use across the board is, anytime anyone says not interested, you could be like, hey, I know this might be an odd question here. However, what makes you say that? And then just getting them to respond. And some people might be like, oh, I'm just not interested. And then you might be like, okay, the follow-up here is, hey, the reason I asked that question is because as a professional, I want to make sure I'm doing my job the best way possible on a day-to-day basis. So for my professional feedback, like, what makes you not interested here? Now you've opened up the conversation. People are willing to give you feedback. And maybe it was something you said, or maybe they were just having a bad day, but also some people just don't like cold calls. So these things are ways to diffuse the situation, to get real-time feedback, to not only be a better cold caller, but to get to the root of what's really going on. So that's my feedback on that one.
Awesome. Thank you for that. My answer would have been like, hey, yeah, if it's in the first 20 seconds, I'm like, they probably didn't even hear what you said.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, I'm not interested. I'm like, I'm sorry, but not interested in what? They're like, whatever you're offering. I'm like, what is that? Like, what's your understanding of what we offer? Like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work. I mean, the first 20, 30 seconds, like, yeah, you're lying at this point. It's a brush off. We don't want that.
We don't want that. We don't want that. Well, hey, I know we have for like 10 or so minutes left. And this is the last episode of Sales Blacker specifically. The theme of it. I know you've been working on some things in the background that are now in the foreground with Sales for the Culture.
Yep.
I've also heard you kind of speak a little bit on I don't know if the two things are intertwined, but speaking on a potential pressure that you might feel like being typically maybe the only like Black person or one of the few and the stages that you've been occupying. But would you care to share a little bit more about not to put you on the spot here, but maybe some of your experiences of like, hey, here's the different things that I have to do or considering when stepping out as a Black man. And then also I think the follow-up question to that would be, hey, like what would you want to see happen within the world of sales to create more spaces for Black people to like come in, feel more comfortable and feel more confident?
Yeah. So lots to unpack there. So one thing I will say is it has been a journey. So I'll give you all this story and then tell you why this is so important. So from a Black sales professional standpoint, like I have that, but also what's going on is like, I used to do talks, right? Trainings in front of people. And typically I'm the only Black guy in the entire audience, but I'm the one that's the speaker. So that's different. It's not I'm in the audience and I'm the only Black guy, but I'm the only Black guy, right? And I'm the speaker. So let's talk about this. So I remember in the panel, when I got in the panel speaking circuit, I was at Rainmaker. And went through the normal information I would go through, providing insights. And I remember going to the happy hour and I'm talking to one of the reps. And he said something that was really impactful for me, which will lead into the point that I'm going to share here. He said, hey, yeah, I'm really inspired right now. I was like, all right, like, what's going on? He's like, I've been in tech for a while and I've never seen a sales Black speaker before. And I was on the verge of not wanting to be in this industry anymore because I felt like people of our color weren't being represented. And he said that the fact that I saw you on stage gave me hope and a light that there can be more people like you up there. So he was like, you got to keep doing your thing. And I felt that hardcore, but also it added, and not really pressure, but I guess for some people that could be pressure, right? Because what if, not saying it's all on me, but if you stop, right, and there's no one else, then like there is no one else.
Yeah.
Right. So that made me honestly go even harder on content. So people ask like, oh, why are you posting so much content? I was like, because that story got me fired up. I don't know how you can't walk out of that conversation and be like, it's game time, right? And so as more I posted, more people obviously in the community now, which is amazing. And so what my second point though is what I've had to realize in every single sales training that I'm in, I have to have basically what's called speed credibility. And what I mean by that is I have to get to the like speed of value, basically is what it's called. I have to get the speed of value as fast as possible to show you like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Because if you didn't know me, right? I got, I got a boo hat on. I got like a t-shirt. Like, I don't know what this guy's going to talk about. So I gotta get to it, right? So speed of value for Black sales professionals is actually critical because you already have basically unconscious biases because you don't even know they're there. I know they're there, but you probably don't. So now what I have to do is, all right, I got to come in hot every single conversation. I got to provide insights that are different. It's one of the reasons why you all see me always pushing the envelope on prospecting, because like I don't really have a choice. Like I have to be innovative and I have to be different because I can't be like everyone else because of the way that this all works. So I have to actually bring it more than everyone else, which I'm completely okay with, which is my style and that's who I am. But I've realized that in sales trainings that I have to bring it even more. Like I got to bring you insights. You're like, what is that? I didn't know LinkedIn voice messages exist. I've never seen that website before. So I know I have to push myself because I have a different expectation going into that room than other people do. And what I'm seeing already in the sales community that, again, I didn't see 5 years ago is like there's just all types of people stepping up now. I mean, we have obviously like you're holding it down on SDR Hotline. There wasn't any black woman doing any content, or I didn't even know that they were even in sales, to be honest with you. And now it's like y'all everywhere, and it's awesome to see. And we have people, I mean, minorities just stepping up. Like I have, Latinos are stepping up. Like I see Asians stepping up right now. Like I'm fired up. And the thing is that like it's not just stepping up like, hey, they make a comment. It's like stepping up and like they're making content. Like they're building communities. Like to me, I'm getting emotional about it because like 5 years ago it just wasn't a thing. Like I legit thought I was the only person. I legitimately thought I was the only person. And the thing is, like, I was comfortable with it because I went to private school. So I already was like the one of the 3 black people. Like this was like a normal thing. I was like, all right, like, like it's a normal situation. But for me, I went to private school. So it was like, yeah, like, like we've done this before.
Yeah.
So to see the emergence of all these different cultures is very emotional for me, but also it's really exciting because I know that more people will continue to step up. And the more people you see on the panel that are your color, that have your experience, that have your backgrounds, the more people we're going to have involved. So really the culture of sales, like I just see it being more diverse and unique, which we need to elevate the profession so we can be more innovative because, we don't have the best name in the world, but I'm seeing a trend, right? I'm seeing a trend of a positive trend where we're bringing in a lot of minorities that are willing to share ideas, willing to share thoughts, willing to collaborate and grow. And that's what I really see is that we're bringing a culture of diverse people to sell, prospect, different languages. Like it's really fascinating to see. And that's where I see it. It's really focused on not only bringing people in, right? We know this in sales, the culture is like bringing people in and showing them that there is a lifestyle here that can help you be successful and even further generational wealth, which is a whole nother hotline in itself. But what I'm saying here is that it's exciting because people can see like I can actually obtain generational wealth by understanding these sales skills and truly build a future for my family, which is deep, but it's really important because that's what I'm seeing right now is people see the light and they're like, you know what, I can do something here with this. And they're sharing it with their friends, they're sharing with other communities. And it's really exciting to see.
Morgan, thank you for sharing that. No, I say this, but like I got the shiver me timbers while you were talking because it is. I'm trying to think. Yeah, like I mean, I came across Nikki Ivy's profile some point last year, Galen's as well, and I was like, oh wow, like there's other Black women who are speaking up and creating communities.
Yeah.
I think about again, like even when I was searching and seeking out like information for SDRs and coming across the SDR Chronicles and seeing you now, I'm like, okay, I see you, Black man. Let's go. So, but like for 100% for real, it is incredibly inspiring to see people just like not be afraid and to hold themselves to a higher standard than others and to I think really demonstrate a model of what could be and inspire the next generation. And when I think of generations, I'm thinking about even like 6 years, like that's like that, like, all right, the people who are like, I started 6 years ago. So it's the people who are getting into sales now. I'm like, this is a totally different demographic makeup than when I came in. And I think it's an absolutely beautiful. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that needs to be done for these spaces to be safer, for them to be more secure for people of color and for diverse talent and things like that. But I mean, just knowing that it's possible is incredibly amazing, incredibly inspiring. So thank you.
100%.
Definitely. All right. Well, we're like right at the hour. I'm going to jump off and start preparing for a meeting pretty soon. But you know, is there any last questions? Anything you might want to end off with, Morgan?
I was seeing if there was any questions here that someone wanted to drop a quick fire question. If you want to drop in the chat, we can do it. So this is my thing. What I encourage you all to do is to be a nudger. So this is what I mean, is that there's someone in your life right now that they need a nudge, not a push. Notice I'm saying not a push, a nudge, right? Don't be aggressive. Like, you need to be doing this, like a nudge. Like, there's someone who should be starting a podcast. There's someone who should be doing more in their job. There's someone who should be leaving their opportunity and going somewhere else. There's someone who should probably not be in the relationship they're in, right? Like this is just across the board. There's someone that you should be showing love to that started a business, right? And you're just not showing love for whatever reason. Like, it's a nudge. Like, there's someone out there who needs a nudge from you. It's a call, it's a text, it's a video. I don't know what it is, but my intuition is just telling y'all that the nudge is the advice and the takeaway that I want everyone to get it from this. We talked about a lot of great things and we went through a lot of tactics and insights, but ultimately it's a nudge, because if you can nudge someone else, that comes back, right? Because then someone might nudge you on something that you should be doing too. So go out there and nudge somebody today.
Yeah. That'll be a hashtag right there. Nudge somebody.
Nudge somebody.
I don't know why. I just thought of like what is it, Diana Ross? Like reach out and touch somebody's hand, but instead it's like nudge somebody.
You got it.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions here, but again, Morgan, thank you so much for joining today and for for bringing the heat, for bringing the energy, for dropping some gems. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me on, and you will have a great Friday and rest of your weekend.
All right. Have a good one, y'all.